if you've noticed this, but since the start of the lockdown, there are more and more motorbikes on the road dropping things off, delivery motorbikes. Are you going out to buy things, or are you having the things dropped off with you? Now, there's a lot more evidence that all of this is beginning to change. What they call e-commerce is breaking barriers as a result of the pandemic. So, the research firm Statista says it believes the South African market will reach just over 62 billion rand this year. That will show an compounded annual growth rate, whatever that is, of 10% for the next 4 years. In other words, to put it another way, around 37% of people who buy things from, I presume, supermarkets will be buying from online, and over 50% by the year 2024. Newzroom Afrika business editor Xolani Mbanjwa joins us now. Xolani, good afternoon to you. I mean, in a way, we're sort of catching up with the rest of the world. Amazon's 20 years old.
Yeah, we're absolutely quickly catching up to the rest of the world, and COVID-19 has forced us to actually trust these methods of shopping. And, you know, it's not only Statista that actually came up with this research, but others like Ipsos did research as well, and Nielsen Institute also did their own research, which actually showed that 22% more South Africans said they were actually shopping online than in May than they were in April rather than they were in March, obviously due to the lockdown and more people sitting at home. But this particular graph actually shows you quite nicely that fashion still has a huge gap to catch up to electronic and other media, toys, hobbies and DIY stuff, food and personal care. Those are quite huge, but they can't catch up to actually fashion. So when you look at the growth between last year, where we were sitting at just about 50 billion rands of what South Africa were actually spending at the end of that particular year, this year it's projected by Statista that is going to reach 64 billion rands, which is quite a huge rise compared to the previous years. And the forecast is also quite good when you look at the coming a couple of years until 2024. It's going to be a massive rise in online shopping.
It's interesting to watch some of the companies that are involved in this space. I mean, Takealot, Bid or Buy were probably the first ones to go into it in a big way. There were others. Amazon still delivers here and have done for some time. But I mean, other companies entering the online space as well. Some of the big supermarkets, one in particular. Yes,
one in particular being Checkers. Just at the beginning of lockdown to date, they have added more than 800 new jobs on their Checkers 6060 platform for grocery deliveries. But they're not the only ones. You've got Zulzi. They just received a 30 million rand investment in May because they've been they started a couple of years ago, and another one, Yebo Fresh, based out in Hout Bay in Cape Town, they received 2 million rand funding from another institute because of the growth of this particular sector when it comes to online shopping. And more people are going to the big guns like Bid or Buy and Takealot.com to actually use their private vehicles. And during the lockdown in particular, because these services were still operational, and the growth is not going to stagnate. But the big one is still Naspers. They poured 1.7 billion rands into Swiggy, Indian-owned food delivery service, the biggest one. So you'll see more and more of these independent people getting into that space as delivery people or companies in large scale. And you're talking about companies here like Zulzi is saying that they're actually doing about 2,000 orders per day. But it's actually quite a good thing that at this time in our lives during this particular pandemic, one sector is actually seeing the light of day.
It's interesting to note. I mean, I wonder about the other. You mentioned Checkers, but I mean, Woolworths, you would think have a market ready to go. They seem to be almost falling behind. Pick and Pay as well.
No, the Pick and Pay has done very well. Spy is getting in there. Woolworths not so much. But in this space, whether you are an independent shop, boutique shop, whoever you are in the retail space, if you are not thinking about, and that's what the research shows, if you are not thinking about online shopping and as being part of your future, you will really be left behind. And there is a huge market in South Africa. As we've seen, there is a huge scope for growth, and these are just now the estimates that we've seen from Statista.
Every time I have to apologise to the statistician general whenever I get them wrong. So with all of this, I mean, we've got some people left behind. You talk about jobs, very important. I worry about the longer term, though. In other words, we're seeing jobs being added now, but there are hundreds of thousands of people who work in the retail sector, in supermarkets in particular. You're not going to need the sort of fancy place. You're not going to need the headquarters. You're not going to need, you know, the flagship store. You're going to have a website and people packing the goods. It's not going to be employ nearly as many people.
Yeah, in parts of, in the US, for example, and in parts of Europe, you actually have a store. You go into the store. Here in South Africa as well, I think Cape Town has one. You go into a store, you don't buy anything at the store, you're just viewing, and then you go home and do your click and buy from there. It's really a worry, you know, when it comes to, for others, you say, you know, when it comes to jobs, you know, when the drones come and they are ready to deliver in huge bulk, what's going to happen to the people on those bikes and the like? But, you know, that's maybe a future that maybe doesn't belong to our lifetime, but in the near future. But the most important thing right now for this particular sector is to actually regain, get some trust from the consumer. If I am using my card to pay online, are they going to deliver exactly what I need? Is the money going to be stolen? So it's quite important for the trust, you know, that trust deficit to actually, that gap to be closed.